So I'm having some pen play with my friend Maverick, who I met 2 years ago at the Boston Pen Show. And then later, second time I met him was at the most recent Boston Pen Show, where he was wowing me and many other people with a titanium nib pen that he modified with a hand saw. And he will describe this to us in just a moment. At the pen show, he's not writing with that pen right now, but at the pen show you can see the magnificent range of line width that he got with his titanium pen. And what nib was that?
It's a Bach number 6.
A Bach number 6. Now, those of you that know me know that I don't know a Bach number 6 from a hole in the wall. It's a modern pen nib that you can buy over the counter today. It's a rather large nib, and so maybe Maverick can show us with the diagram of how he altered the nib, unless it's a state secret.
Well, not exactly.
Not exactly.
But I have to clarify first, this is not my invention.
Okay.
Yeah, this is inspired by Ralph from
Chicago.
I don't recall exactly, but he has a website that's the Regalia Writing Lab, yes.
Okay. Maybe it's the same guy, I think.
Yeah,
he's the one that makes the 9-tined pens.
Oh yeah, really, I think the Ninth Symphony.
Yeah. They're amazing pens he makes, and he's a really nice guy as well, but his pens generally are about going from loud to really loud, where I think Maverick wants to go from quiet to loud, the full range. And so, as you can see here, he's getting quite a lovely range, going from very fine to pretty darn broad.
Yeah.
And so if you can just show with a little diagram of the pen nib where you added the cuts.
Oh, yeah. So
looking down on the nib from the top, you have the nib shape.
Yeah.
And
I apologize for my kind of poor drawing.
Yeah, that's okay. We understand. So that's the standard nib. You've got the breather hole. You have the single slice between the two halves of the nib. And so to make it be more flexible than it was, where did you add the cuts?
Yeah, so I think the most important part of this is first I extend the tines from here, from the breather hole, all the way down a little bit.
Almost to the back to where it meets the section?
Yeah.
Almost all the way. Wow.
Yeah.
So if you stopped there, you'd have I would think that would be really, really flexible, but you decided to go one step further.
Yeah, it's by experiment, just extending this tine along, at least for titanium nibs, it does increase flex, but the character of that flex is not what I like. Maybe in terms of the quote-unquote snapback or something, yeah. But then, okay, before talking about other things, I actually drew a hole at the end of this.
Okay, drilled another hole to keep it from cracking further. You want you do that to reduce the chances of metal fatigue.
Yeah, that's one thing. The other is this other hole serves as a breather hole as well.
Another breather hole. So
yeah.
It's breathing with both lungs. Okay.
Yeah, so to speak.
And then where did you added something else?
Yeah, that's this cross cut. Like I said, I learned from Regalia Writing Lab. So
to me, it's really neat. It seems like it would start to split, and then suddenly it seems that it would get, if you kept on applying the same amount of pressure, if you started light and then just added pressure equally all the way along, it would go from thin to thicker to really thick. It seems like it would be really, there'd be a big jump there, maybe. But maybe you get used to it and it doesn't do that. But I mean, it seems like over here you had perfectly good control of what you were doing.
Yeah. So, that's sorry to interrupt you,
no,
but that seems to be like the flex character that I'm trying to at least experiment with. Yeah, but right now I think this is, it's just controllable.
Yeah.
It's not too okay.
Okay. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So I would say the curve of the flex is it's kind of linear like this.
Because sometimes
it's
they
not
go
like this.
it goes like that. You know, you a little bit of pressure and it just completely spreads apart. And other times I've noticed that I have to sort of step on the gas a lot before it wants to be tight, but then it can get wide. So they're all so very different. I have a bunch of dip nib pens that we can play with a little bit. Maybe we'll make a different video about that with us. But I just wanted to let people know. So with this pen now, this isn't cut like that, is it? Or is it? It is.
Well, it's sort of.
Yeah, I guess I do see. Can you show the pen?
Sure.
I just so you do see the. So you do see the horizontal slit, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if this really helps, but I also reduce this.
You reduce that. Well, that would, anything you can do that would reduce. I don't know whether, you know, with this particular nib, because it goes way back there, I don't know whether that reduction is going to make that much difference in the long run. You know, maybe if it was cut back there. I mean, this is where if you had 10 nibs that were all identical to start with, you could have a lot of fun, you know, deciding what you can do to make it work. Now, what if you did this? And again, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but what if you had a nib and you did like that seems like that would be an interesting thing to see. I would think the line that it would make, you know, with the pressure, it seems like it would just skyrocket because you'd have all of these ways. You know, when the thing was spread, it would be like that, you know, where the cuts are way open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to describe. It's hard to hold the camera and draw at the same time, but
yeah, I get the idea. It's like,
but that might be interesting. You know, shaping a nib. I mean, you don't want to take too much off here because you need ink underneath the nib.
Yeah.
To work, but if you were to, you know, cut it out further back.
Yeah.
But again, you know, it's weird with ink, you know, if too much of it is in one place, it might drop a big blob of ink. So
about this design, I did see a nibmeister on Instagram. I couldn't recall his name, but this has indeed it has been done by other people, and it seems like they are soft. But the point is, actually, this is a good time to talk about the motivation of this particular pen.
Yeah.
So after I played with a real vintage nib pen that I got from David, I realized it's not like for flex nib to write quote unquote well, it's not like, well, the softer the better. So if you look at this nib, the writing samples of this particular nib and the other pens I brought to the pen show, this pen is actually not that soft.
May I try it?
Yeah, sure. But that's on purpose.
Okay. It's really nice. I love how. Oh, it's really quite lovely. So does this have iridium tipping on it?
Yeah, it's the standard tipping.
Standard rhodium or whatever they tip it with.
Yeah, but I actually grind it down to
Okay.
like XXF or something.
Yeah. Oh, neat. I do have a pen nib somewhere in my collection of pen nibs. I think it's a dip nib, so it doesn't have a breather hole, but it's cut like this.
Oh.
So that might be another way where you might get an interesting difference of how it goes from broad to really broad. You know, you just don't want to go so broad that you railroad. You want to make sure that there's ink there that's continually being fed, that it will work.
Yeah, so this is, again, if I recall correctly, there's some vintage, like the World War II era Japanese nibs, they call the Shiro nib.
Okay, and they're cut like that?
Yeah, they're cut like that. I think the idea was that at the war, gold is kind of a material that's somehow somewhat controlled by the government.
Yeah.
So the manufacturers tried to use steel at that time to recreate the flex character of gold nibs, and this kind of cut is what they tried.
Yeah, I have seen steel nibs with that, but I have a gold nib that's cut like that.
Yeah, but for gold nibs, won't these ends become like crack?
I would think that they would. Most dip nibs, when you get a vintage dip nib like this one, you don't have breather holes.
Yeah.
And so I think the breather hole was put in there for two reasons. One's to breathe, to have the air come in so the ink can go back out. But it also was there for stress related purposes too. So here's a dip nib for you to try.
Yeah, so the character of that is like
really fine.
Finer.
Yeah, the fine is what those Victorian dip nibs knew how to do really well. They also did that really well. They would railroad because there's no feed underneath. So you have to really what some people would do, they'd hold the nib over a flame, and the soot of the ash would get underneath on the bottom part of them, and that would help hold ink.
Yeah.
And I've also seen some Victorian dip nibs that have had a crosshatch pattern scored into or printed onto embossed onto the thing, which also helped hold the ink. So here's another one. And the reason I love dip nibs is they're all so very different from each other. And the really fine is really fun. I'm going to stop this video in a second, but I'm going to let you. So if you can imagine the perfect nib, what would it be? Like the one you're using, except really excruciatingly fine to begin with?
Yeah, that's kind of difficult to describe, but I would start with something that can recreate this very fine hairline of the Victorian era nibs. Then maybe for the other end of the spectrum, it's like
the broadest broad or a big broad.
2 to 3 millimeters of broadest stroke. So yeah.
Now, the Maverick, the pen that you brought to the pen show last year that did all of this stuff, you had the guy from New Hampshire. What's his name? I can't remember. Suddenly, he sharpened the nib for you.
Oh,
Why can't we think of his name?
Richard Binder.
Richard Binder. Richard Binder took his nib and very carefully, as he does with all the pens he works on, he I hate using the word grind. That's, I want my nib ground. It sounds so coarse, but he carefully reshaped the nib to be a really, really fine point. Did he not?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we played with it a little bit afterwards. I didn't get a chance to really. It's hard to compare. You don't have both pens. You only have one pen, and you have a memory of what it was like before. But it was really neat to see. But you were having problems with it flowing after that because you had emptied the pen and all that stuff. So, or something was causing it to be different in that way.
Oh, speaking of that, I don't want to complain about any particular brand or something, but what I do want to complain is some of this modern day ink, they really suck.
They certainly do, and you can complain. You can name names. Which ones don't you like?
Yeah, so then again, the point is I don't want to name particular ink because that's bad for me. They may be good for others, but the issue is these pens, they have these wide ebonite feeds, so it has a good ink supply.
Yeah.
So it may railroad, but you can see when it works, this is pretty saturated.
Yeah.
It is not until you switch back to the quote-unquote modern plastic feeds with very narrow ink channel that you see the difference.
Yeah.
This ink on those pens, they get a very, very light color.
Okay. So I have difficulty with certain inks if they're too thick, and the sparkly inks and all of those inks, they're awful because they've got crap in them. The sparkles are solid. They're not, they clog and it just goes slowly. And I know that if I don't put the cap on my ink, it gets gummy. And but if there might be inks that are too watery too, and I don't like those because they're not saturated enough.
Yeah, it's a fine balance.
A fine balance is right. So I'm going to stop this one here just because I want to make sure it doesn't stop in the middle, and we'll be back in a second.